It is divisional weekend. There were a lot of interesting wild card games. Who am I kidding? Most of them were one sided. What is going on, everybody? I am Mac, back with another video. These are my divisional round picks for my Pick'em tournament as I did advance. As just as a disclaimer, be prepared for possibly deep analysis and a long video, as every week after wildcard week I take a lot of notes for my picks should I make it that far. In fact, I'd say this is where most of my notes come in. But yeah, I went 4-2 in wildcard weekend, advanced on, and now it's time for divisional. So for those that made it to divisional, congratulations. Pretty much the same rules apply, except the only thing that you really need for this week is a spread. That's the only mandatory pick that I'm going to give you. Locks and upsets are optional, seeing now that there's only four matchups, but you need a spread for this week. So, once again, I got a lot of notes, and let's just not waste any time. These are my divisional round picks. So, starting things off on Saturday, we have the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens going at it in Baltimore. The Texans, the number 4 seed, shellacked the Cleveland Browns 45-14 behind a strong day by C.J. Stroud in his playoff debut, and the Texans defense with 2 pick sixes on Joe Flacco. Now they go up against Joe Flacco's old team in the Baltimore Ravens, who are the number 1 seed. And something I gotta say, I may have said this a couple weeks ago, but if I didn't, I'll say it. I'll say it now. I always thought resting starters was dumb, especially when you're in a position like the Ravens, where you have the number 1 seed locked up and you have a first round bye. So I always thought resting the starters was dumb. You know, so I really don't know how much of that is going to affect Baltimore, considering that they had now 3 weeks of rest with their starters. And I think that's one of the components that actually screwed the Steelers in 2017 when we rested our starters against Cleveland in week 17. It's like, back then there were 6 playoff teams per conference, and we had a first round bye as number 2 seed. But it's like, what's the harm? Your guys are going to get a first round bye anyway, so what's the harm in just playing them? And I get that, you don't want to risk injury and damage Lamar's chances at MVP, but I don't know. It's just my opinion. But anyway, you take a look at both of these teams. CJ Stroud, as I mentioned, coming off a phenomenal debut in the wild card game. And these two met all the way back in week 1 where, yeah, Baltimore won, but CJ Stroud actually did outplay Lamar Jackson. And the Texans offense, allowed 0 sacks in that wild card matchup, but now they're going up against the Ravens, who have just an elite defense all around. As I said in my week 18 preview, they are top 5 in just about every category defensively, but with their pass rush and the sacks, they are first with 60 sacks in the pass rush and the sacks, and Jadeveon Clowney has been the main catalyst for that pass rush this season for Baltimore. So I think CJ Stroud is really going to have to focus on spreading the ball out, and he's going to just have to make real quick decisions like release the ball as much as you can. But, like I said, that's a tall order going up against that elite secondary that the Ravens have, who are first in pass defense all season. Nico Collins, I think, he really needs to step it up as well. He had a really good wild card game, 6 catches for a touchdown. He needs to play more on the outside, and Dalton Schultz, I think, needs to come up big too here, because the Ravens, I really think you got to test them with playing tight ends, and I think Singletary, a big X factor in that one as well. Basically, in order for Houston to win, you gotta beat Baltimore at their own game, which is just run the ball efficiently and have CJ Stroud, you know, mimic what Lamar Jackson can do. I really don't know if Houston can have that full potential with their team in general. Meanwhile, with the Ravens offensively, you got Lamar Jackson, who's been in the MVP talks for the better part of the last month and a half. But even though he didn't play great in week one, that doesn't diminish what he did on the regular season. I mean, when the Ravens are playing with him, they average 28.4 points per game, which is fourth in the league. They are first in rushing this season. Lamar and Gus Edwards both had over 800 yards on the ground. And now you can throw Justice Hill up there. And so for Houston to step up defensively, the linebackers really need to come up big here. They got to put a lot of pressure on Lamar Jackson here because Houston did hold running backs and the run game to a respectable amount. They only allowed 3.3 per carry, which they led the league in. So, yeah, I mean, that right there needs to be the case with Houston's defense. They got to force a lot of turnovers because the Ravens, in all four of their losses this season, they lost the turnover battle. Well, they tied the turnover battle with us, but honestly, can you count that as a dub for them? But you get it. You got to force turnovers on the Ravens, and you got to come up with a lot of pressure. You know, you got to make Lamar feel the heat right there. Mainly with Grenard, who had a phenomenal year with Houston. But the problem with the Texans is that they do not blitz a lot. But I feel like, yeah, if they can come up with turnovers like they had the 2 pick sixes on Cleveland, the Texans have a real good chance at winning. But with the Ravens, I mean, you got to get guys like Zay Flowers involved in the slot more. He led the team in targets. OBJ and Bateman have had breakout years. Isaiah Likely, I think, is the biggest X factor in this one here for the Baltimore Ravens because the Texans have given up a lot to tight ends this season. And overall, with the Ravens just being dominant at home and with the way that their defense has been, with them allowing the third lowest rating against wide receivers, Stone and Hamilton on that dynamic duo with the secondary. Then you got Smith and Queen up there with the dynamic duo, and the Ravens being dominant at home. Plus, with the Texans just being very up and down on the road this year, I think those are your big X factors here. For the Texans defensively, Desmond King had a real good breakout game. He doesn't really give up a bunch, but this is just going to be a tall order from him. And then they do have a strong secondary. You know, you got Stingley Jr. and Petrie, but like I said, I think Baltimore's offense just has too much firepower. So the Ravens are favored by 9. I do think there is value in taking Houston with the points here. But overall, I just think Baltimore's well rested, and I think that they're just the more complete team going at it here. I'm going to go ahead and unfortunately take the Ravens to win this game here, but I do think the Texans will give them a really good game. But overall, I'm going Baltimore on this one. Then for Saturday night, we got the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers going at it in San Francisco. Once again, these two meet in the playoffs. This is the 10th time that these two franchises have met in the playoffs. The 49ers have won the last 5 matchups between these two, going back to 1998 with the infamous fumble game. And then obviously 4-0 against Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. But now Aaron Rodgers is not with the Green Bay Packers, as Jordan Love has built up a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum over the course of the last month. Lit it up against the Dallas Cowboys in his playoff debut. And Jordan Love, like I said, playing with a lot of momentum. 32 touchdowns, 11 picks on the season, including 21 touchdowns and 1 pick in his last 9 games. And that was against a Cowboys defense that was top 5. Now he's going up against San Francisco's secondary, which is 4th in pass defense and led the league in picks. So that's a big matchup right there. Another big match. I mean, this matchup right here is full of interpersonal matchups right here. Next matchup you got to figure is going to be Romeo Doubs against Chardavius Ward. Doubs has been a real good target this year for Green Bay, but you got to take a look at a lockdown guy like Chardavius Ward, who's always capable of locking down guys. Green Bay's linebackers against CMC, that's another one right there. The Packers have stood up against the Packers have done respectable enough at times against the run game, but most of the time they've gotten gashed by it. And going up against CMC right there, I think that favors San Francisco right there because we know the type of running back that he is. We're talking about a 49er team that is top 3 in both scoring, defense, and offense. And offensively for them, they were 3rd in yards per gain on the ground this season. So I think that's a mismatch right there with the inconsistency that the Packers have with the run defense. Niners linebackers against Aaron Jones, something to look out for as well. Niners are very physical up front. They don't blitz much, but they are just completely stacked on that front four. Now with the addition of Chase Young, complemented that with former Steeler Javon Hargrave, and of course Fred Warner is just always pairing up well with Nick Bosa. So I mean that 49ers front four right there is just always going to be dangerous, but Aaron Jones is no slouch himself. He needs to be the bulk for Green Bay's offense. He's had 4 straight 110 plus yards on the ground in his last 4 games. And the Packers' offensive line has protected Jordan Love well. So I think that's another key one right there is how is Green Bay's offensive line going to fare well against that vaunted stacked front four that the 49ers can throw up against you. You take a look at the secondary, Green Bay secondary against Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy putting up MVP type numbers as well. And the Green Bay Packers secondary, overall, didn't really get destroyed, but they do have some struggles this year with going up against tight ends. They didn't struggle too much against Pollard, but like I said, with a mid-run game and with inconsistencies against tight ends, I think George Kittle is your X factor in this one right here because he has done very well against safeties, and I think winning the turnover battle here is key for my final matchup right here. You know, you're talking about the defense that the 49ers have. They've led the league in interceptions this year. You got to make a young QB like Jordan Love, who's going up against an elite defense like this, make mistakes and make them feel the pressure, even though they don't blitz a whole lot. You know, you got to win the turnover battle. Green Bay doesn't turn the ball over a lot. They've always done a really good job with protecting the ball. You got to make Jordan Love spread the wealth a little bit. Musgrave stood up real well when everyone else was quiet. Pretty much, yeah, that's what the 49ers got to do. Offensively, you got to get Ayuk and Deebo Samuel involved, as Green Bay does not do well against wide receivers this year, and that is my X factor here. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel right there. So in conclusion, even though the 49ers have a lot of momentum and even though Green Bay does as well, they have a lot of confidence. The Niners are just Green Bay's kryptonite when it comes to the playoffs. Even though I do think the Packers can make it very interesting, I'm still going to go ahead and take the 49ers to win this one. I just think that they're the more complete team. I think they have more favors for them in this one. And at the end of the day, I just trust Kyle Shanahan a little bit more than I do Matt LaFleur in situations like this. I think that Shanahan is a better motivator. I think that Green Bay just has too many young guys on this team and they have that playoff win under their belt. Now they just go up against a more experienced team. I'm going to go San Francisco to get the job done once again over Green Bay. Sunday slate of games, Sunday afternoon, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Detroit Lions going at it in Ford Field. The Lions with 2 home playoff games. What an incredible season it's been for Detroit, and I hope it continues. Do I think they can host the NFC Championship? Well, they should honestly be rooting for Green Bay in order for that to happen. Yeah, the Lions, for as much as they hate the Packers, they really need to be pulling for Green Bay this weekend again. I know that's what they were doing with Dallas. But yeah, that's incredible to think the Lions could be hosting 3 playoff games. But anyway, you take a look at Detroit. Really good game against the Rams. Their first playoff win since January of 1992. 32 years ago, man. That's just incredible right there. And they played the LA Rams really well offensively. But now they're going up against a Buccaneer team that you really can't sleep on a whole lot. Tampa Bay defensively, they don't do great against the pass defense. They're 22nd in that department, which is where I think Jared Goff needs to come in and just handle business. He needs to make the necessary throws, needs to make creative passes like threading the needle that he did against the Rams, and he needs to make real good, keen throws and respond well to blitzes. This was a Lions O-line that allowed 3 sacks against the Rams, but they've allowed only the 4th fewest all season, and Jared Goff is kind of like a big double-edged sword when it comes to the picks against the blitz this year. 13 touchdowns to 6 picks against the blitz this season, as with Tampa Bay defensively, they're 3rd highest in blitz rate this season, as they had 48 sacks on the season, which is 7th in the league. Also for Detroit, you got to take a look at factors like Amon-Ra St. Brown, his dynamic ability, and his dynamic that he brings to the offense. That is a big key component for Detroit right there. As I said before, Tampa Bay, they do not do well against the pass defense this season. So definitely you got to get Amon-Ra St. Brown heavily involved like he did against the Rams. Josh Reynolds and Sam Laporta, I think, are also key for this one as well. Sam Laporta, I didn't think he was going to play last weekend, but he looked just fine to me. I don't know if you guys saw that, but definitely, yes, Sam Laporta has played real well. Javonte David for Tampa Bay, I think he's going to be heavily utilized in this one because he's covered more than anyone else on the team. But you look at this Bucs team, even though Javonte David is real good, they do get gashed by tight ends. So like I said, get Sam Laporta involved. And also Gibbs and Montgomery are key for this one here. You got to test them against Tampa Bay because the Bucs have done respectable in the run game this year. They are 1st in running backs rating allowed this year, and they're 8th overall in the run game. So in conclusion, Tampa Bay defensively does have some significant things about it, but overall you're looking at an inconsistent Bucs defense against a hot Detroit offense. For the Lions defensively, they are not great defensively, but they do have some things as well. I think these two teams are kind of similar defensively. They just need to be able to finish tackles, and they can't let them have that big game because there were moments where Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp were going off against Detroit. They can't have that happen here because the bulk of Tampa Bay's offense, Baker Mayfield had a dud game against them back in Week 6 when they played for the first time, but in the wild card game, he turned in possibly the best game of his career. Really good game for Baker Mayfield with 3 touchdown passes, over 300 yards passing, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were heavily used in that one. So like I said, the Lions, they got to be able to finish tackles, and they can't let Tampa Bay have that big play offensively, which we know the Bucs are capable of doing. Brian Branch needs to be on it as well here and lock down some of the targets that the Bucs have, because I think Cade Otton and Rachaad White are going to be X factors for Detroit in this one here. The Lions have been kind of mid with tight ends this season, and they really need to step up when it comes to locking down tight ends. But my biggest X factors here, and they both favor the Lions. Aiden Hutchinson, huge X factor for Detroit in this one. 7 sacks in the last 3 games. And the Lions have played well against the run this year. They are third in yards per carry. So I really don't know with how Tampa Bay is going to plan on running the ball. So overall, this may not be as much of a mismatch as you might think. Like I said, I think these two teams are similar defensively, but overall, I'm leaning towards Detroit to win another playoff game here. I think the Lions have a more established offense. I think they are more defined defensively. And I think if the Lions just clean up a couple of mishaps like they had defensively and they really just test Tampa Bay offensively here, I think the Lions have a great chance of going to the NFC Championship game. And I think that will be the case. I'm going Detroit to get the job done over Tampa Bay once again and to move on to the NFC title game. Wrapping up divisional round weekend, we got the best matchup of the weekend in my opinion, as a rivalry is being renewed once again, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. So all 4 of these matchups this weekend in a way are rematches, and this is no exception right here. Kansas City and Buffalo, the Chiefs got the job done in the cold over the Dolphins 26-7. The Bills got the job done in the cold over the Steelers 31-17. But here's the main headline here for the Chiefs. This is uncharted territory for them, as this is their first road playoff game with Patrick Mahomes. And this is the 3rd time that Mahomes and Allen will meet in the playoffs. Mahomes has won both of them so far. As back in the regular season, there was that controversial call that took a touchdown away from Travis Kelce. And then obviously the last 2 times they met in the playoffs, Kansas City dominated them in the first one. And then the Chiefs won the second one with the infamous 13-second game a couple years ago. But I think these two teams are very different from their last playoff matchup. With Buffalo, they really haven't changed much offensively outside of the fact of getting a new OC, but they're picking up right where they left off. 27 points per game in their last 4 home games, and Josh Allen continues to be the biggest double-edged sword in the league, as yes, he does lead the league in touchdowns, but he also leads the league in turnovers. Well, he's a lead leaguer in turnovers as well, but that wasn't the case against us. He didn't turn the ball over a single time against us, which is what we needed to do to beat them. But defensively for Kansas City, I say it every week for them, this is a very underrated defense that the Chiefs had, and they did hold Josh Allen in check respectively enough in their Week 14 matchup. And the Chiefs, with 57 sacks on the season, they are second in both that and QB hits. But Buffalo does give up the fewest sacks this season, so there's a big key matchup right there. Also for Buffalo, you got to look at their run game. James Cook had a really big game against the Chiefs in their Week 14 game, and the Chiefs do give up 4.6 per yard against the running backs this season. So I think the Chiefs definitely need to step up defensively on the ground. But Kansas City offensively against the pass, they've done rather well. They're 8th in pass defense this year. The only really big wound they gave up was a long touchdown to Tyreek Hill. But overall, you're looking at a Chiefs defense that was 2nd in points per game with 17.3 points per game and 2nd in yards per game. The Bills are 6th in total offense. So I think overall, Buffalo's offense against Kansas City's defense is your main matchup right here. Defensively for Buffalo, they did hold their own against Mahomes. In their matchup here, just a touchdown and an interception, and a Buffalo defense that strives with pass rush, 54 sacks on the season. They're 4th in that, and they're 6th in QB hits. Meanwhile, for Kansas City, they just got to keep doing what they're doing offensively, as the Chiefs were 28th in sacks taken this season, so that's a big mismatch right there. I'm always looking at mismatches and X factors for stuff like this. 28 sacks taken this year for Kansas City, Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I misread it. They allowed 28 sacks this year, which is second fewest in the league. So I definitely think both pass defenses are gonna be tested right here. Rashee Rice needs to step things up here, as with a Kansas City offense that has had a plethora of drops this year. Rashee Rice finally stepped up. 8 catches for 130 yards. But Buffalo has done well against receivers this year. So I think the Bills just need to continue doing what they're doing with the pass defense, as they're seventh in pass defense this year. But they have struggled against tight ends. And I think you know what my X factor for the Chiefs is right here in Travis Kelce. I think he's going to want a lot of revenge for that matchup back in Week 14 where he was denied a touchdown with the forward pass game, as I like to say. So I think Isaiah Pacheco has to be an X factor here for Kansas City. If they can get him going, I think that they will really have a good chance at winning right here. Some interpersonal matchups. Spencer Brown going up against George Karlaftis is huge right here. George Karlaftis has always been big for Kansas City's defense. Omalu against Dawkins, that's also big. Buffalo's lineman against Chris Jones is also huge. Snead against Diggs, that's big as well. But I think the biggest one here is going to be Ed Oliver against Kansas City's linemen. 9.5 sacks on the season for Ed Oliver against a Kansas City offensive line that, yes, has allowed the second fewest sacks on the season, but against a bull rusher like that and Ed Oliver, that's going to be huge. And I think Snead covering Diggs is also going to be big, because Snead does lock down his guys, but Diggs was kind of held in check against the Steelers a little bit. But like I said, Josh Allen just has more to work at his disposal than Mahomes does at this point, because you can trust Josh Allen's targets more than Mahomes' targets at this point, because the Chiefs' drop passes are huge. So in conclusion, this one was hard for me to come up with as well. But I'm going to say Buffalo conquers their demons in the playoffs against Kansas City, and they go back to the AFC Championship game for the first time in 3 seasons. I just overall think the Bills have more going for them in this one. I generally tend to go with the hotter hand here. The Bills have won 6 in a row. The Chiefs have I think they've won, 3 in a row, something like that. No, they've won 2 in a row. But overall, I just go with the team that has the hotter hand, and I think that favors Buffalo for this matchup here. And the fact that we don't really know how Mahomes is going to strive on the road in the playoffs for the first time in his career. So I'm going to go Buffalo to get the job done over the Chiefs. I don't know what the weather's going to be like in Buffalo, but I don't think, again, this is why I say I don't really talk about the weather a whole lot, because both these teams really know how to play in cold weather. But I'm going to go Buffalo to win it over Kansas City, and this will actually be my spread of the week. 25-21. Buffalo gets it done over Kansas City. That'll do it. Those are my divisional round picks as I await for my opponent to give his picks, and then I await for the other 6 members to do it as well. But yeah, let me know what you instinct down in the comments. What are your divisional round picks this weekend? And this is Mac checking on out for the day. Have a good one, everybody.